March 15th, 1943, Detroit, Michigan. Snow drifted through the late winter air as the smokestacks of Ford's Willow Run plant belched black clouds into the sky, a beacon of American industrial might visible from miles away. Colonel Otto Hoffmann, operating under the alias Frank Miller, snapped his camera shut, certain that his intelligence on American aircraft production would confirm the Führer's dismissal of American industrial capacity. What he couldn't possibly know was that this very factory would become the living embodiment of his nation's miscalculation, a miscalculation that would help seal Germany's fate in ways no battlefield defeat ever could. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. This is the story of how German intelligence operatives, trained to see America through the lens of their own propaganda, underwent a profound transformation when confronted with the overwhelming reality of Detroit's war production, and how their revelations came far too late to change the inevitable outcome of the war. Oberst Otto Hoffmann adjusted his tie nervously as he walked through the Detroit Athletic Club in February 1942. At 47, the Abwehr officer carried himself with military precision that he tried desperately to soften. 3 months after Pearl Harbor, his mission had become infinitely more complex. Posing as Frank Miller, a Swedish-American business consultant, he had operated in the United States since 1939, establishing a network of informants around Michigan's industrial heart. "Mr. Miller, good to see you again," said James Caldwell, a junior executive at General Motors, who had no idea he was speaking to one of Germany's most skilled intelligence officers. "I've secured us a private table." Hoffmann nodded appreciatively. Caldwell was unwittingly valuable, loose-lipped after a few drinks, impressed by Hoffmann's knowledge of automotive engineering, and flattered by the attention of someone who seemed genuinely interested in his work. "Production is absolutely chaotic right now," Caldwell said, lowering his voice after their drinks arrived. "We're still figuring out how to convert everything to war production. It's a mess, frankly." Hoffmann nodded sympathetically while mentally cataloguing every detail. "I imagine the transition from civilian automobiles to military vehicles must be extremely complex." "You have no idea," Caldwell sighed. "We produced over 3 million civilian cars last year, and now we're stopping completely. The retooling alone is a nightmare." Hoffmann's expression remained neutral, but inwardly he smiled. The chaos Caldwell described aligned perfectly with Berlin's assessment. America's industrial conversion would be slow, disorganized, and ultimately too late to impact the European theater. He had been sending similar reports for months, all reinforcing the Führer's belief that American production was a paper tiger. Meanwhile, in Berlin, Sturmbannführer Werner Schmidt reviewed Hoffmann's latest intelligence at Abwehr headquarters. Schmidt, chief analyst for American industrial capacity, had built his reputation on dismissing exaggerated reports of American capabilities. At 38, his academic background in economics had made him the Reich's foremost expert on American industry. "Another excellent report from our Detroit operative," Schmidt told General Major Hans Oster. "The Americans are flailing. Their factories are in disarray trying to convert to military production. It will take them years to achieve meaningful output." Oster, deputy head of the Abwehr and secretly part of the German resistance against Hitler, studied Schmidt carefully. "Are you certain?" "Other reports suggest the Americans are moving more quickly than expected." Schmidt waved dismissively. "Consider the numbers, Herr General. In 1941, Germany produced 11 776 aircraft. America produced only 19 433 despite having no war damage to their factories. Their production increase is modest at best. By the time they fully convert, we will have won the war in Europe." Oster nodded, keeping his concerns to himself. He had learned to pick his battles carefully in the Nazi hierarchy. Furthermore, Schmidt continued, our agents report significant labor unrest in Detroit. The workforce is undisciplined, with frequent strikes and absenteeism, nothing like our German labor discipline. What neither Schmidt nor Hoffman knew was that in an ordinary office building in Detroit, a transformation was already underway that would make their assessments catastrophically wrong. Eleanor Richardson wiped sweat from her brow as she pored over production charts at the War Production Board's Detroit office. At 32, the former economics professor had been recruited to help coordinate the industrial conversion of America's automotive industry. These projections can't be right, she told her colleague Robert Daniels. Ford says they can build a complete B-24 bomber every hour at Willow Run once they're at full capacity. That's impossible. Daniels, a former Chrysler production manager, looked over the numbers. Actually, it's not. They're applying assembly line techniques to aircraft production in ways nobody has tried before. It's revolutionary. Richardson shook her head in disbelief. That would mean one plant could produce more heavy bombers than the entire German aircraft industry combined. Exactly, Daniels said quietly. And that's just one plant. By April 1942, Hoffman had established a routine of visiting different observation points around Detroit's industrial zones. Today, he stood at the public viewing area near the newly constructed Willow Run bomber plant, watching workers stream in for the morning shift. "Impressive, isn't it?" said a voice beside him. Hoffman turned to see an elderly man watching the factory. "Indeed, though I hear they're having terrible problems getting it operational," Hoffman replied cautiously. The man chuckled. "My son works in there. Says they're figuring it out faster than anyone expected. He worked on car assembly lines before, says this isn't so different, just bigger parts." Hoffman nodded politely, but made a mental note to investigate further. His reports had emphasized the technical difficulties in converting automotive expertise to aircraft production. If American engineers were solving these problems already, that contradicted his assessment. Later that evening, Hoffman met with Ernest Weber, a German-American factory worker who sympathized with the Reich for financial rather than ideological reasons. For $300 a month, a fortune to Weber, he provided Hoffman with details about production at Chrysler's tank arsenal. "They've got 3 shifts going now," Weber reported, pocketing his payment. "Round the clock. And they've solved that transmission problem I told you about last month." Hoffman frowned. "How quickly?" "Couple weeks. Engineers work day and night. We're pushing out M4 Shermans faster than anyone thought possible. 30 a day now, heading to 60 by summer." Hoffman calculated quickly. 30 tanks daily from one factory meant nearly 11 Udro-Zero tanks annually, almost equal to Germany's entire tank production. And this was just one of many new tank plants. "Are there still labor problems, strikes, absenteeism?" Hoffman pressed. Weber shrugged. "Some, sure, but nothing that's really slowing things down. They just keep hiring more people. Women, old men, people coming up from the south. The lines keep moving." For the first time, Hoffman felt a flicker of genuine concern. In Berlin, Schmidt was berating a junior analyst who had suggested American production might exceed expectations. "Nonsense!" Schmidt declared, throwing a report across the desk. "These figures are American propaganda. Their production culture is fundamentally incapable of the output they claim." The analyst, a young man named Friedrich Müller, who had studied at MIT before the war, stood his ground. "The Americans have advantages we're not accounting for, Herr Sturmbannführer. Their automotive industry was already the largest in the world. Their ability to standardize parts and processes. They make soft commercial products for civilians," Schmidt interrupted. Manufacturing weapons requires precision and discipline their workers don't possess. Their society is too individualistic, too chaotic. Mueller hesitated, then spoke carefully. With respect, sir, I've seen their factories. Their approach is different from ours, but extremely effective. They emphasize standardization and quantity over craftsmanship. One American factory can produce more vehicles than 10 of ours. Schmidt's face reddened. You've been influenced by their propaganda. Get out. After Mueller left, Schmidt drafted a memo reinforcing his conclusion that American production figures were greatly exaggerated and would never significantly impact the European theater. By July 1942, Hoffman could no longer ignore the evidence before his eyes. The industrial transformation happening in Detroit contradicted everything he had reported. One morning, he used a press credential to tour a converted Fisher body plant now making aircraft components. Last year we made Cadillac bodies here, his guide explained. Now we're making parts for B-17 bombers. Complete conversion took 6 weeks. Hoffman struggled to maintain his composure. Only 6 weeks? Yep, we're ahead of schedule now. The trick was keeping the same basic assembly line principles, but adapting them for new products. That evening, Hoffman coded a new message to Berlin, his first that seriously questioned the Abwehr's assessment of American production. He described seeing completed Sherman tanks being loaded onto trains at a rate suggesting production levels may exceed our estimates. He noted the speed of factory conversions and the effectiveness of American mass production techniques applied to weapons manufacturing. When Schmidt received Hoffman's report, he immediately classified it as compromised. Hoffman has clearly been fed disinformation, he told his superiors. These production numbers are fantasy. No industrial system could increase output at the rates he describes. But Hoffman wasn't the only German agent raising alarms. By late 1942, multiple reports suggested American production was accelerating beyond all German projections. In Detroit, Eleanor Richardson now directed resource allocation for Michigan's war production. In November 1942, she presented the latest numbers to visiting officials from Washington. Gentlemen, Detroit has exceeded every production target set last year, she announced proudly. Ford's Willow Run plant is now producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every 63 minutes. Chrysler's tank arsenal completed its 5. It drove Sherman tank last week, and we're just getting started. One official whistled softly. What about the material shortages Berlin keeps celebrating in their propaganda? Richardson smiled. Largely solved through substitution and recycling programs. We've collected enough scrap metal through drives to build 10 Osazern tanks. Synthetic rubber production will exceed natural rubber imports by next year. The Germans have no idea what's coming, do they? Another official commented. No, Richardson replied. I don't believe they do. By December 1942, Hoffman had abandoned his preconceptions and was reporting raw facts, regardless of how they contradicted earlier assessments. After observing the Dodge Chicago aircraft engine plant, he sent an urgent message. New factory-producing aircraft engines at unprecedented rate. 5,000 workers, 3 shifts. Output already exceeds 1,000 engines monthly, doubling every quarter. Similar facilities under construction elsewhere, but in Berlin his reports were increasingly dismissed as compromised or exaggerated. Hoffman has clearly been turned, Schmidt insisted to his superiors. These numbers are impossible. America simply cannot produce military equipment at these rates. General Major Oster, increasingly worried, asked quietly, "And if they can?" Schmidt had no answer. In February 1943, Hoffman took his greatest risk yet. Using a telephoto lens, he photographed the parking lots of major Detroit factories during shift changes. The images showed something remarkable. thousands of newly constructed vehicles crammed into every available space, ready for delivery to military depots. 1 week's production from single factory, he noted on one image, showing rows of M4 Sherman tanks, suggest immediate reassessment of enemy capabilities. Then, his handler in the German embassy replied with orders to focus on sabotage possibilities rather than production estimates, which Berlin considered compromised by enemy counterintelligence. Hoffmann realized his reports were being ignored. For the first time, he questioned whether his duty to Germany might require him to make Berlin understand the true nature of the threat, regardless of ideological preferences. Meanwhile, Friedrich Müller had been reassigned to a minor post analyzing American consumer goods production, but he continued collecting information on American industrial output, creating a shadow report that painted a very different picture than Schmidt's official assessments. When Müller finally gained an audience with Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, in March 1943, he came prepared. "Sir, with respect, we are catastrophically underestimating American production capacity," he began, spreading charts across the Admiral's desk. In 1942, America produced more military equipment than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. Their 1943 production will more than double that. Canaris, who like Oster, secretly opposed Hitler, studied the figures carefully. Schmidt dismisses these numbers as propaganda. "They're not, sir. They're confirmed by multiple sources, including our own agents. America has created something unprecedented, mass production of complex military equipment at scales we cannot match." Canaris was silent for a long moment. "Even if you're right, I'm not sure it matters anymore. The Führer will not accept this assessment. But Germany must prepare for—" "The Führer sees what he wishes to see," Canaris interrupted gently, "as do many others in our government." In Detroit, the industrial miracle continued accelerating. By spring 1943, more than half of all military equipment used by Allied forces originated from factories within 200 miles of Detroit. The city had truly become, as President Roosevelt had declared, the great arsenal of democracy. Hoffmann, increasingly desperate to make Berlin understand the true situation, took his greatest risk in April 1943. He arranged to tour the massive Ford Willow Run bomber plant, now in full production. What he saw there shattered any remaining doubts. The Willow Run facility stretched for over a mile, employing over 42 Zollern workers. Inside, B-24 Liberator heavy bombers moved along assembly lines exactly like automobiles had before the war. Every hour, a complete 4-engine bomber rolled out the door, ready to carry destruction to German cities. "How many bombers can you produce monthly?" Hoffmann asked his guide, struggling to keep his voice casual. "We'll hit 500 per month by summer," the guide answered proudly. "More than Germany's entire aircraft industry combined, I'm told." The guide had no idea how those words affected the man beside him. Hoffmann knew the exact German production figures, barely 2 Zollern bombers of all types for all of 1943. This single American factory would produce over 6 Udrojro heavy bombers in the same period. That night, Hoffmann abandoned protocol. He sent an uncoded message directly to Admiral Canaris. American production capabilities vastly exceeded all estimates. Detroit alone outproducing entire German war industry. Strategic reassessment urgently required. The message was intercepted by American counterintelligence, leading to Hoffmann's arrest 3 days later. When FBI agents entered his apartment, they found him burning documents. He offered no resistance. In his interrogation, Hoffmann surprised his captors with his candor. "Your industrial achievement is unprecedented in human history," he told his interrogators. "I tried to make Berlin understand what you had accomplished, but they refused to see it." One FBI agent asked, "Did you really believe Germany could win against this kind of production capacity?" Hoffmann was silent for a moment. "We believed America was soft, undisciplined, incapable of the focused national effort Germany had achieved." We were utterly wrong. Your system of production, it's like nothing we imagined possible. In Berlin, Hoffmann's final message reached Admiral Canaris, who shared it with a small circle of officers increasingly concerned about Germany's strategic position. Friedrich Müller was invited to present his complete assessment of American production capability. In 1942, America produced 24 Juro tanks and 47 Jurun aircraft, Müller told the stunned officers. Their 1943 production will exceed 29 Juro tanks and 85 Jurun aircraft. By comparison, our production in 1942 was 6 200 tanks and 15 400 aircraft. We are being outproduced by more than 4 to 1, and the ratio worsens each month. Schmidt, also present, interrupted angrily. These figures are Allied propaganda. Our qualitative advantage cannot overcome these quantities. General Major Oster finished quietly. Not when their equipment is also good enough. Not when they can replace every loss while we cannot. Canaris dismissed everyone except Oster and Müller. When they were alone, he asked, "Could we have known this sooner? Could we have anticipated this transformation of American industry?" Müller nodded slowly. "The signs were there, sir. Their automotive industry was always the world's largest. Ford pioneered mass production techniques we never fully adopted. We focused on craftsmanship and engineering elegance over standardization and volume." Oster added, "We saw what we wanted to see, an America that matched our preconceptions rather than the reality." By summer 1943, the impact of American production was being felt on every front. Thousands of Sherman tanks produced in Detroit arrived in North Africa and then Sicily. Endless streams of trucks, jeeps, and aircraft supported Allied advances. The strategic bombing campaign against German industry intensified, with hundreds of B-17 and B-24 bombers, many built in converted Detroit automobile factories, striking deeper into the Reich each month. Eleanor Richardson now headed the War Production Board's Statistics Division. In July 1943, she presented the mid-year production figures to military planners. "Detroit's output has exceeded all projections," she reported. "We're now producing more military vehicles every month than Germany can produce in a year. The Dodge Chicago plant alone is producing more aircraft engines than all of occupied Europe combined." One general shook his head in amazement. "Has there ever been production on this scale before?" "Never," Richardson replied. "Not even close. We've created something entirely new, the true mass production of complex military equipment, and we're still accelerating." In a prisoner of war camp in Virginia, Otto Hoffmann followed the war's progress through newspapers provided to prisoners. Each Allied advance, each new offensive, represented the fruits of the production miracle he had witnessed and reported, the reports that had been dismissed because they contradicted preferred beliefs. When another German prisoner, a former U-boat officer, insisted that Germany's superior technology would still win the war, Hoffmann merely shook his head. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "I've seen their factories. While our submarines sink one Liberty ship, they build 3 more. While our fighters shoot down one bomber, they build 5 more. It's not a war of battles anymore. It's a war of factories. And their factories are winning." In Berlin, reality was finally beginning to penetrate even the most optimistic assessments. Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments and War Production, obtained accurate intelligence on American production in late 1943 and was shaken to his core. "The Führer must understand what we are facing," he told his deputies. "America alone is outproducing the entire European axis by a factor of almost 3 to 1. When combined with Soviet production, which now exceeds our own, the material superiority of our enemies is overwhelming." But by then, it was far too late. The strategic window in which Germany might have adapted to this reality had closed. The arsenal of democracy was in full production, and its output would only continue increasing through 1944 and 1945. In April 1945, as Soviet forces closed on Berlin from the east and American and British forces advanced from the west, Friedrich Müller sat in an underground bunker reviewing the final production statistics of the war. For 1944, the numbers told the story of Germany's defeat more eloquently than any battle report. America had produced 96, 318 aircraft to Germany's 39, 807, 17, 565 tanks and self-propelled guns to Germany's 27, 300, and 7, 942 ships to Germany's 622. And behind these statistics stood the industrial heart of American production, Detroit, the arsenal that had transformed the nature of modern warfare. "We never understood what they were building in Detroit," Müller murmured to himself as distant artillery rattled the bunker walls. Not until it was far too late. In May 1945, as Germany surrendered unconditionally, Eleanor Richardson stood in the vast Willow Run bomber plant, watching the last B-24 Liberator roll off the production line. The plant had produced over 600 heavy bombers in just 3 years, more than the entire pre-war German Air Force. "What happens now?" asked her assistant, looking around at the enormous facility. Richardson smiled. "Now we show that our production genius works for peace just as well as for war. We'll be making automobiles again by Christmas." In 1946, Otto Hoffmann was repatriated to Germany as part of prisoner exchanges following the war. Before leaving America, he requested permission to visit Detroit one last time, standing outside the Fisher Body plant. Now retooling once again for civilian automobile production, he watched American workers streaming in for their shifts. An older man stopped beside him. "Looking for work? They're hiring again." Hoffmann shook his head. "No, just remembering." "You were here during the war?" the man asked. "In a way," Hoffmann replied. "I saw something remarkable happen in this city, something history will remember." The man nodded. "We built quite the arsenal, didn't we? Showed the world what American workers could do." "Yes," Hoffmann agreed quietly. "The world knows now." As Hoffmann prepared to board the ship that would take him back to a shattered Germany, he reflected on the intelligence failure that had contributed to his nation's defeat. Germany had believed its own propaganda about American softness and inefficiency, about the superiority of German engineering and discipline. But in the converted automobile factories of Detroit, America had reinvented modern warfare through mass production on a scale previously unimaginable. The war had not been decided by brilliant generals or superior fighting spirit or even technological innovation. It had been decided by production capacity, by the ability to build more tanks, planes, and ships than the enemy could destroy. And in that war of factories, Detroit had led the American victory. In his final report, filed before leaving American soil, Hoffmann wrote, "History will record that World War II was won on the assembly lines of Detroit as surely as on the beaches of Normandy or the steppes of Russia. Germany never understood the true nature of modern industrial warfare until American production had already made our defeat inevitable. The arsenal of democracy was not merely a slogan, it was the new face of war itself." Years later, Werner Schmidt, who had so confidently dismissed American production capabilities, visited the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Standing before an exhibit showing the wartime conversion of the auto industry, he read production statistics that still seemed impossible. 87 Zu-0 aircraft, 45 Zu-0 tanks, 375 Zu-0 artillery pieces, 47 million tons of artillery ammunition, 87 Zu-0 warships, 20 million small arms, all in less than 4 years. "How?" he asked the American tour guide beside him. How was this possible? The guide, unaware of speaking to the former Nazi analyst who had once dismissed these very achievements, answered simply, "We took what we knew, making cars efficiently, standardizing parts, assembly line production, and applied it to a new purpose. Detroit already knew how to build things better and faster than anyone else in the world. We just had to build different things." Schmidt nodded slowly, finally understanding the transformation that had occurred right before their eyes. The transformation German intelligence had seen but refused to believe until it was far too late. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.